Hey, how's it going everyone? It's Sir Kinto here with the beginning of a new line of build videos to help everyday average players get in and complete content. We're going to kick it off with my new Warden Easy Healer build. Sit back, relax, and heal. That's right. I just said that about a healing build, which is something you don't usually hear. Usually it's insane, everybody's running around everywhere, and you are the one expected to try to keep it all together without forgetting how to do your own rotations and keep up all of your own stuff. The focus of this build is to keep it easy so that you can massively heal your group while still providing plenty of buffs and debuffs like a healer's expected to do. It's designed to be fun and relaxing for experienced players, as well as being extremely accessible, simple, and even powerful for newer healers. Every single piece of this build can be obtained on normal difficulty. That's right, you don't even have to beat veteran content to get this build. I've successfully used it to heal in our newest veteran trial, the Dreadsail Reef, and that was quite an experience. It was very powerful in there. This build has been tested quite a bit, honestly, mostly in random pickup groups, and it made the content I was doing feel extremely easy. Did March of Sacrifices, Layer of Marsalok, and even Depths of Malatar. These were on Vet. I even had some groups where they didn't have a lot of damage on the DPS, and I had a tank that died to one-shots and heavy attacks. But with this build, it was easy to recover, it was easy to get them through it, and you're probably noticing a theme. It just feels really easy. My inspiration, though, for this build was based off of one of my favorite content creators. He made some simple to use DPS builds and tank builds. I thought that it would be really awesome if we had a healer build that was nice and simple to use as well. I decided to try to put it together, and this is what we got. I even had the privilege of running with those builds that I was talking about when we were testing this in Depths of Malatar, once again on Vet. I gotta tell you, we all felt like it was really easy. We were laughing about it. We even had someone who wasn't very confident about doing veteran content at all, let alone Vet DLC content, and we just absolutely killed it. It was so easy to do. The content does not have to be locked behind massive skill barriers that only the most elite can get through. You can do content that well, you can work at it that hard, but that's not the only way to play the game. And that's one of the reasons why I want to make a channel, is because I'm here to help show you guys that even if you're not the most talented DPS, you can't keep track of the whole battlefield as a tank, and you have no idea how a healer keeps up with everything they're doing, you can still get in and do this content. So that's why we're here. Let's get into it. I'm gonna go ahead and start by looking at the character sheet. Go ahead and just get a heal and smash combat prayer. So we're sitting on 32,000 magic, about 25,000 health, and 14,000 stamina. Magic recovery, we've got 1,300. Our health and stamina recovery aren't that high. Those don't matter too much. You're going to find out that the magic recovery isn't that important to this build. It's kind of nice to have, but for the most part, we should be sustaining ourselves without even needing that. So we have 4,500 spell damage, goes up a little bit higher when we're in content and a lot higher depending on group buffs. We have 52% critical chance. Now, that might sound ridiculous to you, but I promise it'll make sense when we get through the rest of this. About 22,000 and 18,000 resistances, which are pretty decent, but it's a lot higher when you start looking at all these stats. There is a lot of built-in mitigation beyond just that number. Alright, let's start with the skills. The Energy Orb. This starts as Necrotic Orb. It's the last skill under your Undaunted skill tree. Let's go ahead and look at that. Come down to Guild, Undaunted, and you've got Energy Orb here, and that was morphed from Necrotic Orb. You project a globe of regeneration, floats forward, heals right now unbuffed every second for anyone nearby, and it gives them a synergy and heal everyone around them for much more than that. And they get back 4,000 of their primary resource. This is something you ideally want to point at the tank, but obviously everybody can get resources from it. This is kind of your primary way. If the tank's starting to run out of juice, you could just run up and put this in his face, in their face, and then they'll have an easier time sustaining. It is an extremely strong heal. It happens every single second, which is really helpful for the specific sets that we're using. And just talk about the passives for Undaunted while we're here. They don't actually specifically benefit the skill that we're using, but they're definitely good to get to increase your max stats and increase the amount of recovery you get whenever you do use a synergy. Next skill we'll talk about is Radiating Regeneration. This starts as Regeneration on the Restoration Staff skill line. Let's see, that'd probably be under weapons, right? I'll find this stuff eventually, I promise. Share your staff's life-giving energy, healing up to 3 targets for 15,000 health over 10 seconds. Now, once again, all these numbers are just base. This, you'll find out once everything's going, this is going to be much higher. This is kind of our bread and butter heal over time. This will find anyone within 28 meters. It's going to enable you to keep track of them even when they're not right in front of you, which is one of the main ideas of this build, because depending on mechanics, player skill, someone's baby cries and they look away from the screen, people aren't always exactly where they need to be. So this skill really helps a lot with that. We'll talk about the passives of the skill line while we're here, and it's going to apply to the other skills we're using too. We'll skip over the ones that don't really matter much, but this automatic heal that finds anybody is going to be 15% stronger when their health gets low, and it is in general already boosted by 5% because it's a resto staff skill. Next skill we'll talk about is Ward Ally. This starts as Steadfast Ward. Alright, you call on your staff's strength to protect, read this, you and the lowest health ally around you with a massive damage shield. It protects you right away every time you use it, which means that instead of being the healer that's on the ground that everybody else has to get up, you're keeping yourself alive. Believe it or not, it's a lot easier to heal when you're alive, so this is pretty important for an easy healer build. And the thing I really love about this is the shield strength is increased up to 100% depending on the severity of the target's wounds. We were talking here about a 15% increase to healing done with restoration staff skills. That's, that's significant. That helps. But this is just so good. It basically says, you want to die? No, you're not allowed to die. Not until this runs out. This finds them anywhere around you, the 28-meter radius. You're probably picking up on a pattern here. It doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter what they're doing. We're going to keep them alive as long as they're not outside of your range. You get that shield. They get that shield. Both of you stay alive. We're talking about basically an entire DPS health bar. When we start talking about the champion point we're using from the Brink, which is another 11,000 damage shield. Then you talk about one of the sets we're using, and you put all that stuff together. You can have one DPS stand in an AoE, pop this ability, and all of a sudden they've got over 37,000 points of damage shield on them. They are not going to die. They're going to have to try to die for at least a couple seconds. And if that wasn't insane enough, we even use the champion point Cleansing Revival. Removes every single negative effect that can be cleansed from him. It's very hard for someone to die if you're keeping up with this. And it's very easy for you to keep up with it, because that's the whole point of this build. It makes it easy. Hitting this gives you time to turn around and find them if you need to give them more healing attention. A lot of people are probably familiar with the other morph of this, the Healing Ward. The thing that it doesn't do is target you with a damage shield. As soon as you stop keeping yourself alive, this build isn't easy anymore. Trust me, all these things were designed to fit really well together and make this a relaxing experience. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next skill, and that is going to be Combat Prayer. I'll try not to beat it up too much, but we'll talk about why it's so important for our build specifically. This is your main spammable heal. It starts as Blessing of Protection. You morph it to Combat Prayer. It says slam down your staff to activate its blessings. Heal you and allies in front of you for 11,000 health. Once again, that's unbuffed. That's quite a lot of healing from one just slam. This is something that I think a lot of healers miss out on in content. It also grants Minor Berserk and Minor Resolve, so you're giving them 5% damage increase for the damage they're doing, and you're giving them 3,000 more physical and spell resistance.
Which there are only a handful of ways in the game to get this Minor Resolve buff. It's typically the healer's job with one of these two skills, one of the morphs of this skill.
There's other ways to do it, but usually this is what people depend on. The thing that's so beneficial about this build compared to others is, okay, I'm keeping everybody healed, I got Combat Prayer, it's counting down for 10 seconds, and then I get distracted and I bar swap, and I'm laying down a wall of elements, and I'm running around doing this other thing, and something else is going on, then I bar swap back, oh, I missed it. That might have seemed like only a couple seconds, but that easily could have been a much longer period of time that they didn't have that extra resistance buff, that they weren't doing that extra damage. So one of the benefits of simplifying this is you keep everything up 100% of the time, no problem. So these numbers that you're seeing and these things that you're doing are actually consistent, and you will notice that in the content.
Some people talk about they like to use Breath of Life or the mushroom-based heal. You would think I'd know this being on a Warden, but I honestly don't use this that often. The fungal growth, which has a couple of morphs, and in some cases it's stronger. Specifically, I think the Breath of Life is stronger, but Combat Prayer heals everybody. So instead of you having to spin around and figure out where that health bar dip was, if they're all relatively in front of you, not even directly in front of you, you just slam this once or twice, probably only once when we talk about everything else you have going on, and they're fine again.
And then we'll talk about the last normal skill on our bar, and that is Green Lotus. Now this right here is the star of the build. This is the reason I put this on a Warden. It's the 4th skill under Green Balance. Starts out as Lotus Flower, and you morph it to Green Lotus. Embrace the Lotus Blessing, causing your light attacks to restore health, and your fully charged heavy attacks to restore a lot more health, 5,000 before we even get buffed, to 2 targets for 20 seconds. That's the duration of the skill, 20 seconds. So every time you light attack, you're healing 2 people. Every time you heavy attack, you're healing 2 people. And then there's also the passive of the Restoration Staff, which we haven't talked about and we'll get to in a second, which is healing another person. Basically, this build is designed for you to not have to worry about your magic sustain, because you're heavy attacking as often as you can, and your heavy attacks are doing a lot of stuff for you. Combined with this skill and with the automatic damage shields that come out of nowhere, heavy attacking when you can't think of anything else adds so much to what's going on with your group. Now at the bottom it says it gives us a buff while it's active. That's not important for us because that's included already with the gear we're using. If you are reapplying skills or applying them for the first time, you can light attack weave them, or especially if you're trying to burst heal through a damage mechanic, you can light attack weave your Combat Prayer if you're a DPS who's kind of used to that, and that's going to give a ridiculous amount of healing because it's the Combat Prayer heal for everybody, and this targeting the people who still need a little bit extra every single time. One of the biggest uses I see of this though is if your tank just got hit by a heavy attack and they either didn't block it and survived, or they're just having trouble maintaining, your heavy attack pops, you get the Restoration Staff passive, which is a massive heal, and then one of these goes to him as well, along with the damage shields and everything else. Sometimes you forget you need to heal people. You're literally just keeping up your skills and heavy attacking and watching it do the work for you. It's amazing. So yeah, don't neglect to hold down your heavy attacks as much as possible. Let's talk about passives. So this is the only Green Balance ability we're using, but it does everything we need it to anyway. This one right here. When you heal yourself or an ally under 40% with a Green Balance ability, you get Major Mending for 4 seconds, increasing healing done by 16%. Now granted, every time you heavy attack with a restoration staff, you get that anyway. But if you don't have time for a heavy attack, and you were in the middle of running around, you just resurrected somebody else's health is dipping, then all you do is you light attack and you hit your shield. Now you just healed them with a green balance ability. Now you have major mending. Now all your healing over time is just going to be that much more powerful. It helps to keep them alive so much. This obviously is going to help with your sustain, so every time that goes off once per second, which should be most of the time while you're in content, you're going to restore 250 of your lower resource pool, which is going to be stamina for us, which is going to aid us a lot with our core combat, block, dodge, roll, interrupts, that kind of stuff. This is going to increase green balance healing because it's slotted. That only helps a little bit for that one skill, but it's still helpful. And then this is probably everybody's favorite thing about using Warden to heal, is that minor toughness. Anytime you heal anybody with any skill at all, you increase their max health by 10% for 20 seconds. And if you're on a healer, that's never going to fall off. So that also increases the survival a lot just for being there. That's it for the Warden. That's all we're using is green balance, and it might seem like a waste, but trust me, it does what it needs to do. It makes a huge difference. So before we talk about the ultimate, we're going to go back and finish talking about the passives for the restoration staff. So we talked about how we're heavy attacking constantly on this build. Once again, we get major mending whenever we complete a fully charged heavy attack. And then this is the big heal. You heal yourself or anyone within 15 meters of the target for 60% of the damage from the fully charged heavy attack. Well, let's just look at the Oaken Soul buffs real quick. So we've got Minor Slayer, Empower, this is the big one, heavy attacks by 80%. So that heavy attack, 60% of it is healing somebody. It's increased by a lot with Oaken Soul. And Minor Slayer, and Minor Courage, Minor Prophecy, so it's got a bigger crit chance. Minor Berserk, 5% more damage even if you don't have your Combat Prayer running. Then you've got your typical Spell Pop buff. Minor Force, if it critical strikes, you're dealing that much more. Like, I think you get the picture here. It's not just a regular, normal, boring heavy attack. It is severely buffed. And you notice it. When we were running around in content, one of the tanks told me they noticed they got a crit heal for 30,000. I said, oh yeah, I just heavy attacked. That's half of a tank's health just from heavy attacking. On a normal healer, it's still pretty good, but the amount of buffs that we have, and especially the Empower buff, makes that much more impactful than it usually is. Not to mention on a normal healer, you usually do that maybe once a rotation, so every like 15-20 seconds. So it's really not doing that much for you. And this is why that magic recovery doesn't matter much. Our fully charged heavy attacks restore even more magic. And if you do need to block, you restore, what's that? Even more magic. 600 magic every quarter second. So if you just find yourself being mobbed by ads for a second, you can literally block cast any of these skills, and you shouldn't have any trouble sustaining it, at least for 5 seconds or so while that's going on. So we're using mostly light armor. I don't want to go too much into these passives, but basically it increases your chance of critical strikes. It increases your penetration at base, which is going to help your heavy attack to hit even harder, and it is going to make it easier for you to sustain your magic. I recommend using one piece of heavy armor on the build. You don't need all of these passives. I would say the most important ones would be the Juggernaut. Increase your own max health because you surviving is important. And Rapid Mending is a small bonus, but once again, your own survival. And this, because we heavy attack constantly on this build, and that's going to give you back even more magic from your heavy attacks. I'm a Khajiit, but all of them can do it. It's just the idea of making up for your differences. Bretons are Very good usually as a healer just because they reduce the cost of your magic skills, but that's not important on this build because you already have all the sustain you could need in most situations. So we will talk about why I like having the Khajiit. First of all, he looks really cool. And second of all, this was my Frost DPS, and I'm using the same character, and he was a Khajiit for the damage passives. The races aren't that important, so this gives us some recovery, some base stats, and this really actually does help on this build. Increases critical damage and critical healing by 12%. Now in like a fully buffed trial, you don't really need the extra critical damage most of the time. Your group's going to be bringing that with all the buffs that are going on. But that critical healing is unique. It's kind of hard to stack critical healing. There aren't a lot of things in the game that do it. So because we have a 50%, 52%, almost 60% chance to critically strike if we have an organized group, that really benefits us quite a bit. With that, there's only one more skill I'd like to talk about. People like to talk about medicinal use, because if you have this passive, you level up your alchemy, your potions last longer than their cooldown, which means when you reapply it, you never lost the buff that you got from the potion. On this build, you don't need to keep up your potions. You don't need to spend your potions. You don't need to constantly pour money into it just to be able to go enjoy content. You use potions when you need them. If you forget to heavy attack, pop the potion real quick, get it back, get yourself stable, and then keep heavy attacking. If tank drops the boss and you're dodge rolling every single attack is a one-shot and you can't afford to get hit, you could dodge roll 3 or 4 times just by popping the potion when your stamina runs out. Even if you find yourself in a position where you don't have time to pop a heal, or your heal's not enough, or whatever, you get to heal from the tri-potion when you need it. I highly recommend for this build, only use the potion when you need it, and you're not going to hear a lot of people say that. But that's one of the unique things about this build. Back to the last skill, our ultimate. This is called Light's Champion. It starts as Panacea, and it morphs into Light's Champion. This is a highly overlooked morph. This base ability, right? Release rejuvenating energies of the staff, swirl around you, healing anyone who needs it at the time, only one person, for 12,000 health a second. That's a massive find whoever needs it in 28 mirrors and heal them. And once again, that's before buffs, non-crit. So that can be likely anyone's entire health except for tank every second. The really cool thing about this is the overlooked part. Any target you heal gains major force for 8 seconds, increasing their critical damage by 20%. As a healer, major force between you and the tank is something that the group kind of expects you to bring when you're trying to focus on damage. Our main focus is on healing and survival for ourselves and the group, but you're still bringing this buff, and it makes an extremely noticeable difference when you use this ultimate. Now, the reason I say this is highly overlooked is that doesn't seem very good. It only lasts for 8 seconds, and only the friendly target that you heal. Well, it's going to target all the people in your group, especially in a 4-man group, which is what this is designed for. Once again, people running all over the place. This finds them. It's incredible for that. 8 seconds of major force might not sound like much. This ultimate only costs 125. Warhorn is twice as expensive, and it only gives major force for 10 seconds. So just at base, this skill, even a trial group, is going to be giving more average buff time than your Warhorn is at the same time as keeping them alive. So that's a minimum of 16 seconds of major force as opposed to 10 seconds. Not only is it cheaper, so it's more efficient, it heals, which is better than Warhorn, but also, because it's cheaper, you can use this every single trash pull. By the time you go to the next one, it's basically ready again. And then you use it multiple times throughout a boss fight. And specifically, when you understand the mechanics, you can target it for when there's a heavy burst mechanic, like the shield break phase in Moongrave Fane. It'll give you that burst of damage when you need it, and then you'll have it again later when you need it. You won't be fighting to get your ultimate back in time. That's why I think this is a highly overlooked ultimate. And the other use of this is this heal for 5 seconds is perfect for a resurrection. You literally make sure your hots are running, and if you don't have time, pop the radiating regen, pop your damage shield, and then hit this ultimate, and then go start resurrecting them. It is going to be very hard for you to die from even standing in a damaging AoE while you're resurrecting them if this is running. With all of that out of the way, now we can finally get to the good part. We're going to start with the Spell Power Cure. Now when you overheal anybody, you give them Major Courage for 5 seconds. And this is a huge buff, 430 weapon and spell damage. That implies that they need to already be at full health. If people are standing in front of the healer inside their massive array of heals, they are probably always going to be at full health with very minor dips. This is going to have a very high uptime for them. Remember, this build is designed to do that even with people running all over the place. And while we have a reasonable amount of healing going out, it would still be kind of easy for people to not be at full health for a few seconds and possibly miss a pop of this and have some downtime on it. So that's going to lead us into our next set, and this is Combat Physician. That gives us some magic, 2 instances of critical chance buff, which is incredible for this because of this ability right here. When you critically heal someone, you give them a damage shield that absorbs 5,000 damage for 6 seconds. What that means is anytime any of your heals have a critical strike, they get a 5,000 damage shield. The idea of this build being that you heal them no matter where they are, it's easy and you don't have to think about it. This set is incredibly helpful for that. It's absolutely critical. There is a crafted alternative we'll talk about, but this makes it really easy. So the Oaken Soul, it's a set that stops you from being able to bar swap. So you can only use 1 bar, which is the reason this is a 1 bar build. You gain Minor Berserk, Courage, Major Brutality, Sorcery, Prophecy, and Savagery, which we went through. Increase your damage, increase your weapon spell damage, increase your weapon and spell damage, and your critical chance even more. Minor Force, increasing your critical damage. Minor Protection, reducing the damage you take by 5%. Major Resolve, which you have with you all the time without having to use a skill, gives you 6,000 more weapon and spell mitigation. Minor Mending, which is one of the other reasons I want this on a Warden, because a Templar, for instance, already gets Minor Mending from a passive. That's a passive we don't have on the Warden. So that's 8% more free healing for us. And then your Minor Fortitude, Intellect, and Endurance are your small buffs to your regeneration rates for your health, magic, and stamina. Minor Heroism, that really cheap 125 ultimate, we actually get ultimate back every 1.5 seconds anytime we're in combat because of Minor Heroism. And then Minor Slayer, increasing our damage done. Minor Aegis, giving us a further 5% damage reduction. And Empower, which gives us 80% increase to heavy attack damage. The final thing is a heavy armor piece, and I said that you could do this on normal content, and this is a monster set. So you can get the heavy helmet by doing one of the more simple veteran dungeons, or if you don't want to do that, you could just get it for the shoulder instead. And to do that, you just need the Undaunted keys that you get from doing the Undaunted pledges, which can be done on normal. It takes a while with the RNG of turning in the keys, but if you wanted to do that, then you could just do it on normal. It just might take you a little bit longer. And you can use this, or you can use the Symphony of Blades, or you can use the Troll King. All of those sets have the 1-piece bonus, increases your healing done by 4%. So that's why we use this as our final piece, just to get that little top off of our healing power. So specifically, you can use either the Spell Power Cure or the Combat Physician Restoration Staff. It doesn't matter because you keep both sets up all the time. You're going to want that in Precise to increase your critical chance. Once again, to increase the chance of this set popping, because with the amount of healing we're doing, you want to have a high chance because there's not a lot of actual sources every second. So having a high chance means that they'll have a very high uptime on that shield. And then I would recommend the Berserker Glyph just to give you a little boost for 5 seconds every 10 to increase your healing power. You want to run all the gear in Divines. The jewelry ideally would be infused. You can see Arcane here, that's max magic. That still increases your skills, but it's a little bit stronger to have infused for the spell damage for these. We'll talk about the Mundus that we're using real quick. The Thief Mundus. What? The Thief on a healer? That's right. You could use the ritual, and technically your heals might be a bit stronger, but once again, I'm a Khajiit. I've got 12% increased critical healing already. You're going to find we've spec'd our champion points into it, and we want that combat physician to pop every time that it can to save a low health player, or just to keep them topped off so that spell power cure constantly works. You'll notice I golded out my staff, and this is always considered gold quality because it's a mythic. I've got purple, that's blue, and purple gear. You don't need to max out your gear. It still does all the stuff I said that it did, all that veteran content, making it feel easy without maxing out your gear. You'll be even stronger if you gold stuff out, but it's kind of a diminishing return. So if you really like the build, if you're really happy with it, if you have the mats, then go ahead and invest in it, gold it out. It'll look shiny, it'll be a little bit stronger, but it's not necessary at all for this build, which is probably a breath of fresh air for a lot of you out there. Now let's talk about a little bit of alternatives. If you find that your group is surviving really well and you want to increase the damage that your group's doing just a little bit more, you could swap this instead for an infused crusher, which if your tank's not running is going to reduce the resistance of the target by a further 2,000, which increases your heavy attack damage, which increases your healing done, and obviously also has a significant increase on your group's damage done. Let's say that you're just getting started and you don't have spell power cure yet, because that is a DLC dungeon and it can be a little bit more difficult even on normal when you're getting started. And maybe you don't have enough transmute crystals to recraft combat physician, or you just haven't collected much of it yet. Well, I have a crafting alternative as well, and we'll just look at a couple of those pieces. The whole point of this build is to keep you alive and make it easy to keep your group alive. So we went with the Daedric Trickery set. This is going to give you some flat stat increases, and when you deal damage you get one of 5 random buffs. You can get Expedition for speed, Protection for survival, Mending, which if you haven't leveled your restoration staff, if you haven't leveled up your green balance enough to use the Green Lotus skill yet, you could still use this build with the crafted setup and still have a lot of healing. Major Heroism, so you can use whatever healing ultimate or support ultimate you're using while you're leveling up, and Vitality, which once again helps to keep you alive. So this is a good 5-piece crafted set to substitute in when you really don't have the other gear yet. The other set that I like to use for this is the Redistributor set. This is going to be kind of a shocker. People have probably looked at this and said it's a bad set. Trust me, I've tested it. It works. We get max stats, health, magic, and stamina, and this 5th piece bonus. When you overheal yourself, you heal a group member that's within 15 meters of you for 2,000. So this is kind of the crafted substitute for the combat physician. And once again, I tested this in content, and it was doing a really good job keeping everybody topped off. This is just a good alternative that you can use if you don't have the other gear. And then if you don't have Oaken Soul and you don't have the Monster Helm or Shoulder yet, you could use Armor of the Trainee, give you some extra health and magic, which is good for the build. Or you could go to the Willpower set, and you'll get these set pieces very easily. Just anytime you do dungeons, it's an Undaunted reward after you've signed up for Undaunted. So 2 pieces of that is going to give you a lot of extra magic. Just something else you could use to fill in the gaps if you don't have all the gear yet. Let's talk about healing, because if you're here, you might not have healed before. So I'm going to talk about my basic healer philosophy. So let's talk about priorities. When people talk about what a role is supposed to do, they usually break it up into priorities. Your first priority is to stay alive. If you're laying dead on the floor, you're not healing anybody. This is very often overlooked for all the roles, but especially as a healer. If you're dead, you can't heal anybody, so stay alive. The second is keep your group alive. So to do that, you just keep everything up. The final thing is to buff your group and debuff the enemy. You buff your group with the set that you're wearing, buff your group by keeping this up, and you buff your group with your ultimate. That's how this build accomplishes those. But in general, when you're in content on a healer, your first priority is to keep some healing going, make sure you're watching your own feet so you don't die, and keep all of your stuff going so that you keep your group alive. Now let's talk about specifically how to apply this build. Now, this is about to get really complicated. Are you ready? Let's say we're running into the fight. We're going to pre-buff. You want your Green Lotus running. You want to hit Combat Prayer on your group so they're hitting full damage and they've got good mitigation right before they run in. You get Radiating Regen running too. Then as you run in, you just hit them with this, and you can Light Attack Weave, get the other skills going, throw your ultimate out, and then you just Heavy Attack and apply a skill. Heavy Attack, apply a skill. Another one runs out, you Light Attack Weave it. Heavy Attack. See what we're doing here? Just keep up your skills. Someone's health goes low, pop that real quick, get back into the rotation with a Heavy Attack. When a lot of them running out at the same time, that's when you want to Light Attack Weave them together. I don't know if you noticed, but it is really easy to keep this up without even thinking about it. And if it's a boss fight and they're not dead yet, you can go ahead and pop the ultimate again. But it's a trash fight and he's dead. That's basically all there is to this build. To go into a little bit more detail, once again, I said you want to save the ultimate for damage mechanics. You can use it right when you run into the group and you're killing a bunch of adds, and then you'll have it for the next pull, or you wait until you need a little buff for your group. Another way that you could use it is this ultimate is great for resurrecting. So if you're in a group where you've got some squishy people, maybe even your tank is learning the mechanics, then what you're going to want to do is hold that ultimate even though you're in the fight and your ultimate's ready. Just let it sit there, and if they go down, just pop that, put your shield on, hit your ultimate, and start rezzing. And hopefully somebody else is running off with them. Now, ideally the DPS are supposed to resurrect in most groups, and that lets you continue doing all your healing. But unfortunately in the real world, a lot of the times they're over here dealing with another mechanic, or there's another DPS dead, or for whatever reason, the healer ends up having to resurrect pretty often. So it's good to know to do it. As you're watching the health bars of the people in your group, the little small dips that you see are going to be covered by a combination of your healing over time and the heal that comes from your heavy attacks. So that's the easy healer on the Warden. The 1-bar easy healer. Very easy to keep up the skills. Very easy to keep yourself alive. Very easy to keep your group alive. Just sit back, relax, and heal. And maybe even enjoy yourself and be able to focus on the funny conversations you're having with your group while you're doing it. This has extreme survival benefits for your group. You're providing major courage with spell power cure. You're providing major force with your ultimate. You've got minor berserk and minor resolve every time you use combat prayer. And we talked about using the crusher. If you use that, then you're also debuffing their resistance a little bit. I have to emphasize keeping up your heavy attacks. If you have Lotus Blossom, if you watch, I got 2 heals. It's kind of hard to see through the status bar there. 2 heals. Unbuffed in a group. I just healed for 20,000 when that heavy attack finished. And I gave myself the damage shield again. Keep up your heavy attacks. You use a bunch of skills. 1 quick heavy attack. You're never going to fall behind if you're keeping up your heavy attacks. It's just really hard for people to die if you're using this build properly. And unlike a lot of the crazy builds out there with complex rotations and priority sheets, it's not hard to use this correctly. Let's talk about the champion points. So for the blue tree, what you're going to want is Fighting Finesse, which is going to increase your critical damage and healing, so increase your heavy attacks and your healing by 8%. We talked about From the Brink, an 11,000 damage shield whenever you heal someone under 25% health. Cleansing Revival removes all harmful effects when you heal someone under 25% health. And then Weapons Expert. Increase your damage done with, for us, heavy attacks. Well, you do light attacks also, but your heavy attacks by 20%, which is also going to increase the heal that results from your Restoration Staff passive. And then from the red tree, I recommend Celerity to increase your movement speed by 10%, because being more mobile in the fight is going to make you more useful in just about everything. This is one of the keys here. Bastion. increase effectiveness of damage shields by 15%. So those numbers I was showing you are not the base numbers. They're buffed by this. I highly recommend this for everybody, for the exception of actual no death and trifecta attempts. Spirit Mastery. Decrease the time it takes to resurrect by 33%. This one skill right here has made every piece of content in the game way easier than it used to be. Trying to find that window to resurrect an ally with all the mechanics and interrupts and crowd control going on can be really difficult and sometimes impossible in certain dungeons. But because of this champion point node, you can almost always find a window to do it, and it's much easier to keep yourself and your group alive as a healer while you're doing it. And then finally, it's kind of a toss-up for what you feel like you need, but I recommend Boundless Vitality for more health, because we're going to be healing a lot. Our mitigation's helpful, but it's not as important as max health. Now, if you're newer, what I would recommend you got first, probably the most important champion point I would recommend is From the Brink. And we'll talk about that. Go in here real quick and find it. So you start out, you get your passives, and you come over here to kind of the healing side of the tree. Alright, and then you click to expand this. You need to put 10 points into here to unlock it. And then it takes 50 points to get everything for From the Brink. So that's just 60 champion points. So at 180 CP, you can get this. And this is what I would recommend first. And then the second one from there would probably just be increasing your critical damage and critical healing, the Fighting Finesse. And the other two you can kind of get in your own time. For this, it takes a while to get to it, and you don't need 50 points into this, you need 25 to get through here. But I would highly recommend getting this Spirit Mastery, because having that faster resurrections is going to make a huge difference. Your max health is a lot easier to get from the beginning, so if you're very low champion points, you can get this without investing anything into climbing through the tree. Alright, that's it. This is the Easy Healer Warden build. Now this is my first foray into the world of YouTube. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it really easy. I hope you have fun with it. And I hope you help to prove to the ESO community that it's okay if we relax and have fun and still get the content done without feeling like we're working a job. It's okay if you want to do that too. There's nothing wrong with people coming in and just enjoying themselves, because it's a game. Sometimes it's important to try to remember that. And while you're in there having fun with people, please do me a favor. You are playing with real humans, real people on the other side of that microphone and that controller. Show them some respect. Be nice to them. If we can do that, we'll make this game more pleasurable for everybody, and you'll have a lot more people to play in the game with you. So, that's something I plan to work on, and I'm asking you guys to help me with. So do me a favor, like and subscribe if you like this content. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the video. This was recorded using some very basic methods, so it might not be super high quality, but any feedback is welcome. If you have any improvements, suggestions, ideas, I would love to hear them and talk to you about them. And other than that, I hope you guys have a good day, and I hope you really enjoy healing and showing your friends that you can heal now and it's not difficult. I'll see you guys next time.